How many of you honestly and sincerely believe? As a matter of fact, you're totally convinced beyond any doubt. There's something you can specifically do in the next 2 weeks that would make your personal life, your family life, and your business life all worse. May I see your hands in the live audience, okay? You probably know the next question then. How many of you believe there's something you can specifically do that will make all of them better? Okay? Now, as you listen to this on tape, I hope you're responding to me as well. How many of you believe that the choice is yours? Can I see your hands? How many of you believe that every choice has an end result? May I see your hand? How many of you believe making the right choices is your responsibility? All right, now, in these seconds that we've been talking, and it's actually a little less than 77 seconds, here's what you have said, whether you realize it or not. You have just said that regardless of how good or bad my past has been, regardless of how good or bad my present is, there's something I can specifically do now that will make my future either better or worse, and the choice is mine. Now, folks, that's profound. I'll always tell you when I've said something profound. And the reason I do is I found out a few years ago that an incredibly high percentage of my audiences do not recognize my profound statements when I make them unless I tell them this is profound. Now, this is going to involve a lot of communications. We had a lady right here in Dallas went down to see her attorney about a divorce. And the lawyer said, "What's the problem?" And she started rambling. He said, "No," said, "be specific." And she said, "Like how?" And he said, "Well, do you have any grounds?" She said, "Oh, yes." Said, "As a matter of fact, we got about 40 acres right out here on the north end of town." He said, "No, that's not what I'm talking about." Said, "Do you have a grudge?" She said, "No, but we've got a really neat little carport there right on the side of the house." And he said, "Woman, we need to make this personal." She said, "Like how?" And he said, "Well, does that man ever beat you up?" She said, "Oh, no." Said, "I'm up every day at least an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours before he even turns over." And he said, "Well, do you accept any responsibility for the difficulty?" And she said, "Like how?" And he said, "Well, for example, do you ever wake up grouchy?" She said, "Oh, no." Said, "I just let him get up on his own, whenever he will." And he said, "Well, why do you want to divorce the man?" And she said, "Well, the guy just can't communicate." Now, we're going to try to make the communication such that as you listen to this tape, you will have no difficulty understanding exactly what I am talking about. Everything is choice. For example, for 24 years of my adult life, by choice, I weighed well over 200 pounds. Now, the reason I say by choice is simply because I have never accidentally eaten anything. Always a choice. Now, if I choose to eat too much, then I have chosen to weigh too much. You are where you are in many ways because of a series of choices that you have made. Now, I'm the 10th of 12 children. I asked my mom one time, I said, "Mom, why so many?" And she said, "Well, son, where do you think I should have stopped?" Well, it's for sure I didn't think after number 9. Now, you can absolutely count on that. Let me say something that I think is very important. A few minutes ago, you made the observation that the responsibility was yours to make the right choices. Now, responsibility carries a lot of weight in life. Barbara Tuchman, 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner, said the number one need we have in our society today are people who will accept responsibility. And that is so tremendously true. Most people that I speak to think I'm in my early 30s, but actually I'm 68. Now, what that means is I was raised during the Depression. My dad died when I was 5 years old. There were 6 of us too young to work. Small Mississippi town, Yazoo City. We don't even have a village drunk. We share with a little community, next to us. But it's exciting about once a month the train comes through town. And I know that doesn't sound like excitement until I explain we don't have tracks there. And then that puts it in a different category. It really does. We used to hang a mirror at the end of Main Street, make the town look bigger. Well, anyhow, small Mississippi town. Now, let me say something here. You know, I can tease about my hometown for one very good reason. It's an amazing little town. Former President of the American Medical Association from Yazoo City. Former President of the American Bar Association from Yazoo City. Former President of the Southern Baptist Convention from Yazoo City. The former editor of Harper's Magazine is from Yazoo City. Former Secretary of Agriculture is from Yazoo City. Chairman of the Republican Party is from Yazoo City. Jerry Clowers is from Yazoo City. Now, I have no idea what happened to the other three. But, you know, I can tease about my hometown because it has been so productive, and we're going to be using humor throughout because, you see, people learn faster, they learn more, and they remember longer. But the major point I'm making there is we can tease about that little town because of its productivity. People who are confident and productive, they don't mind you kidding them along. Good, clean kidding and humor, I think, very definitely has a place. Now, I don't need to tell you that as a 10th of 12 children, 6 of them being too young to work, heart of the Depression, small Mississippi town, we had a tough time financially in the Depression. Other families had it tough too. But I'm so grateful that for whatever reason, I did not choose to notice what we did not have. What I did notice is what a lot of people did have in that little town. See, even in those times, I noticed some people wore nice clothes. They drove nice cars. They lived in nice houses. They took nice trips. They even had dinner out. Some of them even played golf at the country club. You know what I've noticed in every decade of my life since, and this is the message I really want you to get right here. I've noticed that regardless of the economy, there are some people who don't pay any attention at all to it. As you well know, the media has accurately predicted 27 of the last 2 recessions. Now, there are some people who just don't pay any attention to what other people are doing. For example, I've noticed without exception that in some instances, many instances, when the economy is absolutely magnificent, there are a bunch of folks going broke. I have noticed that in some instances where the economy is absolutely horrible, there are a bunch of folks getting rich. How many of you have noticed exactly the same thing? Now, this is major point number 2. Major point number 1 is you do have a choice. You can do something now about your life, making it either better or worse, and the choice is here. Number 2 is this. It is not what is going on out there. You see, a lot of that you cannot change. There's nothing you can do about Bosnia at this moment personally. There is something you can do about you and your future, and that's what I want to be talking about. It's not what happens out there that makes a difference in your life. It's what goes on between your own 2 ears. Now, that's what makes the difference. Neil Rudenstein's the president of Harvard University, and this is point number 3. His mother is a part-time waitress. His father is a prison guard. See, it's not who your mama and your daddy might have been. It's not what they have done. The question is, what kind of legacy will you leave to your children and your grandchildren? It is what you do. Now, a lot of times we encounter people who have a pity party on a regular basis. They have what we call the plum disease, P-L-O-M, that's poor little old me. And the problem basically with pity parties when they have them is that very few people come, and those who do don't bring presents. Now, let me point out, they did a study of 300 world-class leaders. Now, I'm talking about Roosevelt and Churchill. I'm talking about Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi. I'm talking about Clara Barton and Helen Keller and Mother Teresa, world-class leaders, 300 of them. 75% of them were either raised in poverty, or had been abused as children, or else had some serious physical impairment. But you see, point number 4, they understood it's not what happens to you, it's how you handle what happens to you that is going to make the difference. I think, for example, of the Edsel automobile, which many people recognize as being by far the most profitable motor car that Ford ever built. Now, I know what you listening to this tape are thinking right now. You're thinking to yourself, Ziglar, that sucker was a dog. Well, it cost them a whole lot of money. They stopped production. What do you mean it was the most profitable one? Remember I said a moment ago, it's not what happens to you, it's how you handle it. You see, out of the Edsel came the Mustang. out of the Mustang came the Taurus. They took the mistake, learned from it, capitalized on it, and look at what happens as a result. It's not what happens to you, it's how you handle it. John Fapi was recognized 2 years ago as one of the top 10 young Americans by the United States Junior Chamber of Commerce. I met John when he was speaking for the Department of Defense up in Colorado Springs. He had admirals and generals, CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies in front of him, 19-year-old young man, and he spoke with confidence and clarity and conviction and power. John had graduated from college 3.5 years, cum laude, working his way partially through. You ought to see John drive a car and scramble eggs and go skiing and paint portraits and do those sort of things. You ought to watch him just eat. You see, John Fapi was born without any arms. But as John said to me one day, he said, you know, Zig, if I had the longest, strongest arms ever put on a human being, he said, there'd still be only so high I could reach, only so much weight I could lift. I don't care how long and tall and strong and big your arms might be. They have a limit. But, Zig, you know, I face more situation every day where I have to use my creative imagination than the average person does in a month's time. And there's no limit to what we can do internally. Now, this message basically is the power of hope. Because if there's hope in the future, there is literally power in the present.